I'm Jeffrey Reddick, and I make podcasts for St. Jude Inspire. This is St. Jude Mission of a Lifetime. Inspiration4 is in orbit. The crew members are now realizing their dreams of space exploration after months of training. And on this bonus episode of St. Jude Mission of a Lifetime, I'll talk with someone who was there with the crew as they prepared.
Civilians going to outer space could potentially affect every single person alive because this is a step towards us going. One of the things that was told to us before this documentary was there's Charles Lindbergh. He was the first guy to fly across from the United States to Paris. And before he did that, people were saying, you're crazy, you're not going to make it. And he did it. And now flying from New York to Paris happens all the time. People could look back on this when you're flying to the moon and that's a normal thing. And it's like, wow, there's a documentary on this first flight.
That's Jake Rogal. He's one of the producers of the Netflix documentary series Countdown. He'll tell us what it was like to get to know the Inspiration4 crew, Jared Isaacman, Sian Proctor, Chris Sembroski, and Hayley Arceneaux, and what he thinks their historic orbital mission represents for all of us. That conversation is coming up. Stay with us. The Netflix series Countdown will have 5 episodes eventually. The first 4 are already out. Those introduce the crew members and their families and take us behind the scenes at SpaceX and into an airplane for a zero-G flight and up the side of a mountain as part of the training for the Inspiration4 mission. The 5th episode will come out after the crew returns to Earth. Now, filming that kind of documentary, recording hours of footage and releasing it basically in real time, is a huge project with lots of technical challenges. And it's exactly the kind of thing that Jake Rogal is drawn to. Before this, he was a producer for The Last Dance, a docuseries about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls from the 90s. And he's also produced documentaries about boxers and professional wrestlers like Andre the Giant and Stone Cold Steve Austin. So space exploration is a new area for him. But he told me this story started the way they all do. He was drawn to the people. He read an article in the New York Times about the Inspiration4 crew members, and he wanted to learn more, wanted to get to know them. And he says his instincts paid off. He says they've been very welcoming.
All these people are so warm and they're so available that I felt comfortable right away. And so now it feels like we're doing a show on some of our friends. They've been nothing but awesome. I text with them almost every day.
That kind of goes into this aspect of the mission that I'm really fascinated by, which is the crew members were strangers to each other at the start of this. So you had this chance to not just like document them going through training and stuff, but actually like documenting them becoming a team.
Yeah, and that's been really fascinating. And they came together quickly, not only because of who they are and how open they are to the process, but they all have so much in common at this point in their lives. There's always things to talk about. There's always questions they can be asking each other. If it's just 4 random people in a room, you might not have the camaraderie, but the fact that they're all rallied around this common goal and this common thing, it allows them to have that cohesive feeling. And then the camaraderie starts to happen. And also, like, it might be just luck of the draw, but these 4 people are really cool and easy to get to know. And so it's not surprising to me at all that they get along the way that they do. I think that they all have open minds and they're all very patient and they're all realize how lucky the opportunity is that they're in. So it doesn't surprise me, but yeah, seeing them build relationships and build the team element of it has been something that we're documenting. It's fascinating and it's a big part of the story.
There are, differences between them. Have you seen that play out in whether it's training scenarios or just kind of thinking through what they'll do up there in terms of one person's strengths kind of coming to the forefront and seeing a problem in a different way?
They're very similar in their training. I mean, Jared Isaacman, who's the commander, he is the leader of the mission. And the other people have amazing strengths. Hayley keeps everybody in a good mood and is very positive. Dr. Proctor is very curious, and she really is asking a lot of questions and bringing up things that other people aren't thinking about. Chris is very supportive in the role. He's always there for people to lean on. So they do have individual roles. What's interesting is that they all have separate lives outside of this, and they're all very different. Chris is a family man. Father is number one thing. Jared runs a very successful company. Dr. Proctor is a teacher in Arizona, and Hayley is a PA at St. Jude.
Yeah.
And they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s too. So there's an age difference, and they're at different points in their life. So when we shoot these scenes with them outside of SpaceX and outside of their mission, that's where you feel the difference, because their lives are all in different phases and in different places. But when they come together in SpaceX, there is that common goal, and they are very similar in a lot of ways. But they all have defined roles within the mission, but they complement each other really well.
Was there anything about Hayley's status as a St. Jude patient when she was a child that inspired the way that you decided to tell the story, or was there a way that who she is kind of took you in one direction instead of another?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that when I read that New York Times article and I read Hayley's story, I was the most curious about her. Knowing everything she went through and only being 29, that to me is appealing to see what someone with that kind of strength, how they carry themselves, how they think about the world. So right away, I was drawn to her story, and I think Hayley has become somebody that we all love, that we feel like she's family. I mean, she's so inspiring, she's so compelling, she's so good on camera that it does change a lot of how the show goes. She's 29, she could have been a lot of different ways. She's the youngest, and she's so mature, and I think that I expected it to be someone I felt older than, and Hayley feels wiser than me. Okay, they're in their 20s. I know what that's like.
Yeah.
And Hayley, that's not the case. You can't really define her.
Some of the training that they've been through is, it's really rigorous. Was there a moment that you got to see kind of firsthand where you saw, I don't know if there's an example that sticks out in your mind of somebody kind of, having like an aha moment, or, kind of besting a challenge?
Yeah, it's good timing. We're actually, we cut a scene about them on Mount Rainier, which is in episode 3. And so on Mount Rainier, none of them really knew what they were in for. It's the hardest part of training, I think. They all would admit that. And it was a struggle, and you see them. I mean, Hayley's a good example. She said to train for Rainier, she started on the treadmill, and she got up to 70 minutes on the treadmill, and, thinking like, okay, this hopefully will be enough. She didn't know it was going to be a 9-hour hike, and she has a prosthetic leg as well. So they all refer to that as sort of the moment in their training where a click, that they're a team that can persevere, because it was really challenging. And, it took a couple of days. The day they were hiking up, of course, was like a blizzard and blinding snow, and they all had moments of doubt and moments of fear, and they persevered and made it. So I think that is the moment where they actually became a crew. Jared's leadership style is pretty amazing, and he's one of those leaders that kind of like, he'll be encouraging you in a way where you don't really realize you're being encouraged. And the next thing you know, you're on top of a mountain, and you're like, how did I get here? And it's like, well, Jared kind of encouraged me up to this point. He's very subtle, and he's very graceful in the way he leads. He said in one of his interviews, he's like, man, I hope I'm making the right choice, because what if someone gets hurt? What if it prevents someone from going to space? And what if they have doubts because of how hard this is? So it was one of those things where like, kind of, we need to do it, but I hope it works out. And it did. But I think a lot of that perseverance came from following Jared's lead there.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, how did you get interested in documentary filmmaking?
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Very proud to be from there. My father was a writer and a producer. And so when I went to college, I thought I wanted to be a magazine writer and write for a newspaper. And when I was in college, I was writing a lot and doing a lot of journalism courses, and I just got interested in television. And one of the reasons was watching HBO, and I realized that I'd rather tell stories through television than through writing. I went to HBO out of college, and I worked there for 4 years, and I ended up working on some of the shows that I admired. And I was always into sports, so I knew that I wasn't athletic enough to be on a sports team, but I figured another way to get into sports was to work in docs. So I've just always been into stories. I've always liked storytelling. I just like talking to different people and learning different things, and the best way to do that is through research and stories. And I've always kind of gravitated towards that. So I was at HBO until 2016, and I wanted to work on some other things. So I left HBO to freelance. And ever since, I've just been jumping doc to doc and just trying to work on things that I gravitate towards and things that interest me.
Did you have an interest in space exploration before you started on Countdown?
Zero. I'm not a Star Wars, Star Trek, space. I didn't know anything about space. There's another producer named Jonathan Woods who works for Time, and he's the space guy. He knows more about space than I know about anything. So he coached us through what a Falcon 9 is, how an orbit works. I mean, all these terms. So I've been learning on the job, but I had no interest in space. Not because it's not interesting. I never was around it. I never was around people who were into Star Wars and Star Trek, and so this is all brand new to me, which is fun. And now I'm interested in it. But yeah, leading up to this, I had never heard of 95% of these terms, and I had never thought about space more than probably 10 times in my whole life.
Do you think that, that kind of perspective, that starting place for you gave you kind of, I don't know, fresh eyes to this sort of story?
I think it always helps to have people who know the story really well and don't, because you can get in the weeds very quickly. So if there's someone who knows everything about space, then they're making the space documentary, they're going to assume that viewers at home know things that you might not. So I can bring eyes onto that when there's some overly complex space scene. I think I can step back and say, you guys, I don't understand this. And I'm speaking for the people who aren't space people.
Yeah. And
then you need the people who are pros, so that people like me who know nothing about space can make sure it's legitimate and interesting to the people who love space. So I think you need a balance. The range we kind of use when we're watching a scene is, would my mom like this? And would a 12-year-old kid like this? And if you can hit that, as close as you can come to that bullseye is where you're going to get the most interesting doc. So you always want to be conscious of trying to include the biggest audience you can in the pieces that you're making.
I'm wondering about technical challenges you might have had in terms of some of the extreme parts of the training, whether that was the zero gravity flights or, some of the centrifugal force training. Were there things that you had to do on the set trying to capture those moments?
I was on the zero G flight. I was lucky enough to go, which was, I didn't know I was going to go until an hour before the flight. And that was incredible and an amazing experience. And it's one of those times where I tried to work as little as possible and enjoy myself as much as I could, because I knew I would never be in a zero G flight again. Our poor camera guy, one of the rules was, if you're feeling sick, stay focused on one point in the airplane. So lie on your back and look at the ceiling, and eventually the nausea should go away. But our camera guy had to shoot the whole thing. So he had to look down at his camera, and everyone's getting off the flight and high-fiving, and oh my God, that was so amazing and what a life-changing experience. And I see our camera guy, Tom, get off, and he's green. And how'd it go, Tom? And he just kind of shook his head and got on the bus. So yeah, shooting in zero G was definitely an obstacle. Another one was, there was fighter jet training in Bozeman, Montana. So we had to rig the inside of all of these fighter jets so that we could get the shots of them inside the fighter jets. And we hired a crew, the same crew that shot Top Gun, we hired them. So everything is just on a bigger scale with this, because it's space and it needs to feel grand. So all the shooting we've done is just on a bigger level. SpaceX has been great as far as letting us into the simulators. The simulators are really tight, so getting a camera in there has been tough. And then in the centrifuge, we just had GoPros in there as well. There was no, we weren't allowed in there.
Aside from the technical aspect of whether this mission could have existed 10, 12 years ago, would you have even been able to shoot in those ways?
You wouldn't be as inside as we're able to get. You can shoot the fighter jets from the ground, and you'd be able to shoot them with a camera in the air, but you wouldn't get a tight of Hayley's face as she's doing barrel rolls. So you could still do the scene, but you wouldn't get the feel or the flavor that you get from the cameras that we have now and the technology that we have these days. It's still, it still takes a lot of work and a lot of coordinating, a lot of planning. It's not as easy as just throwing a GoPro in there. I mean, people spend days planning this stuff out. But yeah, there's a lot of technology now that we have that allows us to show. I mean, for example, when they're up in space, there'll be cameras all inside of Dragon. I think all of them are SpaceX cameras. But the fact that we'll have cameras in there documenting this thing and with high quality footage, I think is a new thing. So yeah, this show 10 years ago would have been completely different than the show in 2021.
How have these months changed you or made an impact on you?
I think, and I'm not saying this about Hayley because she's part of St. Jude and this is St. Jude podcast, but her strength and her resilience and what she's gone through has changed me. And I was talking to her about this, and for what she's gone through, a lot of people could be bitter because if she's been through a lot, she's only 29. And I think that's a hard thing to cope with. And I don't know if I would be able to be as positive about everything as she is. So seeing how positive she is, given what she's gone through, and I haven't gone through 1% of that, it makes me just see things a little differently. And I think that has been the biggest impact on me so far. I think the other thing is being around the other three is just not being afraid to try things. These are 4 people who've never been to space. And they're so excited and positive and grateful of the experience that it makes me want to get in a zero-G flight or get in a fighter jet when maybe I may not have done that before this show. So I think it makes you realize you can push yourself a little more. And a lot of it is mental and you can overcome that. So, how will it change me in the long term? I'm not quite sure. And hopefully it will for the better. But right now, when I think I'm like, this project ended today, what will I take away from it? Those are the 2 major things, just the strength of Hayley and the ambition and sort of the go for it attitude of the others.
You said, there's going to be cameras in the capsule. Are you going to be in active contact with them while they're orbiting?
No. We have a crew at SpaceX as well who will be monitoring the cameras, and we'll obviously be with the families while they're in space and things like that. But no, we have no contact with them when they're in space, nor would I want to, because they're going to actual outer space, and I would never want to take up 1 second of that experience of theirs. So I'm actually glad that's not even an option, because I would feel terrible every second I made them think about me while they were in space.
What's that going to feel like for you, though? I mean, you spent months with this crew, and then when they're actually doing the thing, that's the point when you don't get to have that interaction.
Yeah, but I'll be so excited because I know how much this means to them. So I still feel connected to them, even though I won't be able to physically call them or talk to them or wave to them. I've been with them as they're going through this experience, so I carry that with me, and so I feel a huge connection. But it will be weird, like going to sleep on September 17th and being like, wow, they're in outer space right now and I'm in bed. It's a weird thing to think about.
Jake Rogal is a producer with the Netflix documentary series Countdown, Inspiration4 Mission to Space. The first 4 episodes are out now, and you can see the 5th and final episode once the crew returns to Earth. St. Jude Mission of a Lifetime is a production of St. Jude Inspire. We're edited by Grace Korziqua Evans. Louis Graham is the executive producer. Thanks to Anna Berkedahl for production help on this episode. You can find the other episodes of this podcast and more about the Inspiration4 Mission online at stjude.org/inspire. That's also where you can make a donation to St. Jude. And we're on social media. Just search for St. Jude. Be sure to subscribe to St. Jude Mission of a Lifetime, because we'll be back with another episode after the Inspiration crew members come home. Thank you for listening. I'm Jeffrey Reddick.